T minus 1 minute. T minus 50 seconds. T minus 40 seconds. T minus 30 seconds. T minus 20 seconds. Ten, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
And we're on. Okay. Guys, as you come on, if you can do me the usual, if you can like, if you can share, and if you can comment. Hello, Jesus is our hope. Hi, Marcella. Guys, as you're coming on, say hi, say where you're coming in from. Marcella's coming in from Georgia. We've got Stephanie from Ohio. Guys, as you're coming in, just say hi. Please take a second as well and share and like. We have been shadow banned on a couple of our sites, so this is the first time we're actually also streaming to Rumble. We've never done that before. This is the first time we're doing it, so hopefully people can pick it up there too. Hiya Cara, hiya Dee, hiya Daniela. Guys, as you come on, just take a second, like, share and comment away. Our YouTube channel has had a few restrictions put on it as well. We had Pastor Brandon Holthouse on, and we had a couple of thousand views, and then they dropped right down to 1,000 for some reason. So we know that's restrictions, but hey ho, we'll keep going. And guys, look who it is. It's our guest tonight. We have the fabulous Josh Peck on.
Hi, everybody.
I apologize from last time, Josh, because when we went off and I thought we had done with all the questions, I went onto my private profile and there were loads of questions. And, so we sometimes, sometimes I miss it. And last night we had a terrible ordeal with technology, praying that tonight it goes perfectly smooth. So without further ado, we're going to tell you what we're talking about tonight, which I think is really interesting. We are going to talk about everything from the heavens, the idea of being in an interdimensional existence, time travel, all of that sort of crazy stuff that seems a little bit out there, but through a biblical lens, a biblical context, and how we can actually view it. So without further ado, you know that Josh is both a filmmaker, author. He is now, by the way, and I want to congratulations for him, he is now going to be working on Prophecy Watchers. And guys, we've had Mondo on from Prophecy Watchers. Mondo's on in a few weeks again as well. So it's fantastic. It's a really great opportunity, and I couldn't think of a better man for the job. So without further ado, Josh, I'm going to take a second. I didn't let this happen last time. You can just tell us a little bit about yourself if you want, just for a second as people are coming on now, and I'll let you do that, yeah?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Josh Peck, and like you mentioned, I'm very soon going to be working at Prophecy Watchers, but I've been in full-time ministry for the past, over 10 years. But I started off just doing my own thing, self-publishing books. I had a a podcast that at the time was called The Sharpening, and I'm still doing it today. It's now called The Sharpening Report. Um, on the Daily Renegade channel, and so that was like my beginnings, and then I started working at Skywatch TV with Tom Horn, and I did that for about 7 years. That was a lot of fun, and then I moved to recently about 7, 8, 9 months ago, somewhere around there. I moved to IGBY Ministries with Zach Drew, so that involved a move to Illinois. And now I'm going to be going to Prophecy Watchers. But even amidst all these ministry changes, I've always had Daily Renegade as kind of like the backbone of everything that I do. And like you, Daily Renegade actually got created because of censorship, shadow banning issues. YouTube deleted my entire channel, and at that time, it was really growing. I mean, it had like 70 or 80,000 subscribers, and they deleted it because I said that Christian witchcraft isn't a thing, and I did a video on it showing that those two words they're not compatible. It's just witchcraft. Because at that time, and I guess now too, but at that time there was this big trend of these people calling themselves Christian witches, and the video didn't make fun of anybody. I'm a very nice person, I try to be very polite and everything, but I just theologically, biblically, I just said, hey, it's just witchcraft. There's no such thing as Christian witchcraft, because to be a Christian, you're following God, you're following Jesus. And obviously in the Bible, all throughout the Bible, it says not to have anything to do with witchcraft. So you can't be a practicing Christian and a practicing witch. Well, I guess YouTube didn't like that. They still considered that cyberbullying somehow. And they deleted the entire channel. I was never able to get it back. So I had to start a new one, which I have now. And I've got, about a quarter or a third of the subscribers I used to have. I just got past 25,000. So there's still a lot of shadow banning going on, but that was why I created Daily Renegade, which is a place that it's censorship free. It's technically, it's not a 501c3. So the government can't tell us what to do. It's an LLC. So it is a company, and it's subscription based, but we have to do that in order to weed out trolls or people that might try to censor us or shut us down. And so we really have an awesome community, like a family there at dailyrenegade.com. And there I put full versions of all of my videos up, and I don't have to worry about censorship. I can actually talk about Israel and not have to worry about that video getting taken down because I said the Holy Land's name, so because YouTube, they're always changing the rules. It's impossible to keep up, and you never know when your channel is going to get deleted. So I feel you. I've been through it too. Still am going through it, and but that's why we're having platforms like this and helping each other out. And by the way, I'd absolutely love to, if you want me to again, I'd absolutely love to repost this video on my channel once we're all done.
100%. Yeah,
great,
definitely. We are blessed to have you.
Thank you. I'm blessed to be here.
I will listen to an awful lot of your stuff, so I will go on to your YouTube channel and listen to it. And this is probably where I got provoked with the time travel and all of that stuff. But I'm going to start in straight away with what has got the world up, certainly the evangelical world, up in arms, sort of, saying that April 8th in America there's going to be this eclipse. And I've preached on this and given my opinion on this. And the way I look at this is that I've no problem with God showing signs and using things to catch our attention, but they never detract from what the Word says. In fact, they point me to the Word. But I'd like your take on what you believe, if there is anything to take note of, but what April 8th sort of represents.
Sure. Yeah, and I totally agree with you. I'm right there with you on that kind of stuff. And so I'll start off. I'll just give some practical for people who might be brand new to this. I'll just give some practical facts about the eclipse itself. Then I'll get into some of the stranger things, and then we'll look at what the Bible says. So first, it is a total solar eclipse that will occur on April 8th of this year. So like a month away. At the time of this recording. And the path of the eclipse it's massive. It'll travel through portions of the states of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, Michigan, Indiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, Vermont, New Hampshire, and Maine. So absolutely massive. And it's been projected that this eclipse will be the most viewed astronomical event in the entire history of America, which is pretty
Wow.
phenomenal. We're not the oldest
Yeah.
country in the world, but still,
No.
I mean, that's pretty phenomenal that that's coming up in our lifetimes just a month from now. More than 30 million Americans will simply be able to walk outside their home and experience this eclipse. Actually, here's a quote from Kelly Korek, who is the NASA program manager for the 2024 total solar eclipse. And she said this in a news conference at the American Geophysical Union conference. She said, quote, "This is going to be the most populated eclipse in the U.S. with 31.5 million people able to just walk outside of their homes and experience this event," end quote. So that's pretty phenomenal. And those who are in the direct path of the eclipse will discover, and this is weird, that the air temperature suddenly will become approximately 10 degrees cooler once the moon is fully blocking the sun. So those are kind of the more just scientific, practical facts about this. But there are some stranger things about this that other people have brought up. None of this is unique to me. Other people have already done this research, but this is interesting. So definitely something to look at, and like I'll explain at the end. I'm kind of on the fence with some of this stuff, but but it's still interesting to think about, and it's good for us to look at. So the path of the Great American Eclipse of 2024, it will cross the United States on the very first day of the year on the modern Hebrew calendar. And I say modern because for those, if anybody out there follows what I do, I talk about the Dead Sea Scroll calendar a lot, and it is a little different than the modern Hebrew calendar.
Yeah.
It is interesting that this does occur on the first day of the modern Hebrew calendar. I looked on the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, which for those not familiar, just basically it's the calendar that the ancient Jews used, and you find it all throughout the Bible from Genesis to Revelation, and people have been able to piece it together from the Dead Sea Scrolls, and it actually fits. I wrote a whole book about this called The Lost Prophecies of Qumran, if people want more information about it. But I did look on that calendar to see if that date fell on anything, and it's the 6th day of unleavened bread, so I don't know if there's really any significance there. So who knows, but it is worth mentioning that even during the crucifixion of Jesus, he did fulfill something. I mean, he fulfilled most of the stuff he fulfilled was on the ancient Dead Sea Scroll calendar. But some things he did actually fulfill on their current calendar. And the way that I look at that is, Jesus will meet us where we are. Like he'll meet us where we are. So I kind of look at it like that. So it could be significant. Just because it's the modern Hebrew calendar doesn't mean that we just throw it away completely, but it also might not. So, but it's at least worth mentioning because it's interesting. Now, what a lot of people talk about is if you put the path of the Great American Eclipse of 2024, and if you put that path with the path of the Ring of Fire solar eclipse that occurred on October 14th of 2023, and then the path of the Great American Eclipse of 2017. So all three eclipses within a 7-year period. If you put, which that's interesting prophetically too, but if you put that all on a map, they combine to form a giant Paleo-Hebrew Aleph over America. Now, if you just put the path of the two Great American eclipses, the first one in 2017 and the second one of 2024, again spanning 7 years, on a map, they combine to form a Paleo-Hebrew Tav over America. And the center of that Paleo-Hebrew Tav, it forms a giant X, basically. That's what it would look like to us. That falls actually directly over the New Madrid fault zone, which is interesting. Now that's actually not the first time this has happened. So there might be some precedent, maybe, for looking at this, because the path of a solar eclipse that occurred on June 16th, 1806, combined with the path of a solar eclipse that occurred on September 17th, 1811, so about 5.5 years apart, that also formed a giant X over the New Madrid fault zone. And 3 months after that, a series of absolutely enormous earthquakes began to happen on the New Madrid fault. So the New Madrid earthquakes were the biggest earthquakes in American history. They occurred in the central Mississippi Valley, but were felt as far away as New York City, Boston, Montreal, even, and Washington, D.C. At the time, President James Madison and his wife Dolly felt them in the White House. Church bells rang in Boston. And from December 16th, 1811 through March of 1812, there were over 2,000 earthquakes in the central Midwest and between 6,000 to 10,000 earthquakes in the boot heel of Missouri, where New Madrid is located near the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. In the known history of the world, no other earthquakes have lasted so long or produced so much evidence of damage as the New Madrid earthquake. Three of the earthquakes are on the list of America's top earthquakes. So the first one was on December 16th of 1811. That was a magnitude of 8.1 on the Richter scale. The second one was on January 23rd, 1812, and that was 7.8. And then the third was on February 7th, 1812. And that was as much as 8.8 magnitude on the Richter scale. So absolutely phenomenally, massive earthquakes. Yeah. And then we know that there's a place for earthquakes in Bible prophecy because it's one of the signs that we're to look for, earthquakes in diverse places. I would think that if anything would qualify, that would. So the last time that we had this kind of eclipse crossing over X pattern over that area, that's what happened. We had the most massive earthquakes. Will that happen again? I don't know. It might be that, it might be something else, or it might not be anything at all. Now, what's interesting about this one, though, is this is not like a common occurrence at all. So total solar eclipse, like eclipses kind of happen, a lot, but total solar eclipses are more rare. So the next total solar eclipse visible from the United States won't happen until 2044. And even that one, the path of that total solar eclipse is only going to touch 3 states. So nowhere near the long list that I gave before. So if it might be earthquakes, it might be nothing. If it is something that's not earthquakes, what else could it be? Well, some have proposed, and this might be a little bit of a reach, but it at least bears mentioning just in case it does happen. But disease X was a name given to a possible future pathogen that could emerge, named by scientists at the World Health Organization of all places. So some have made the connection that 2 of these eclipses that are 7 years apart form an X over the country. Maybe there's a connection with that and disease X, especially since we just came out of what we came out of, and I don't want to get you. Yeah. I won't name the what happened because I don't want to get you. Yeah. But so some are kind of making a connection there. Maybe this disease X thing will come up. But it's important to point out though that just because it's an X, unless the eclipse followed the exact same path as the previous one and didn't deviate or intersect at all, it just naturally is going to produce an X pattern somewhere on the globe because that's the only thing you can do with 2 lines. You have 2 lines, they're either exactly on top of each other, they're parallel, or there's an X. So no matter what, you're probably not going to have 2 eclipses follow the exact same path without deviating a little bit to form that X. So either way, when you have 2 eclipses, there is going to be an X somewhere. But still, the area where it intersects is interesting. So let's look at some biblical facts to see how we should process all of this through a biblical lens. So Genesis 1:14 says, "Then God said, 'Let there be lights in the firmament of the heavens to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and seasons and for days and years.'" Now that word signs comes from the Hebrew word ot, which can mean a distinguishing mark, a banner, remembrance, miraculous sign, omen, or a warning. So some have said that this eclipse is a sign that something miraculous, like a revival, is coming, while others interpret it as being a warning or a bad omen from God. Well, while we're told that the lights in the sky are for a number of things, including signs, I don't believe that on this side of it today, that I don't believe that we can say exactly what it will mean, if anything. It might not mean anything. Now, afterward, if something happens, then we'll know for sure. But beforehand, I don't think we can predict anything for sure. So, I think it's it's a little bit entertaining, but it also kind of shows where we are as the church when you and different interpretations are fine, but when you get people fighting about it, that's where we talked about this the last time I was on. That's where there's kind of an issue. So we can absolutely have difference of opinions. I'm on the fence. I'm a wait and see kind of guy. So I'm not going to say anything definitive right now. I'm not even leaning in a certain direction.
Yeah.
I always say it's a good idea to have emergency supplies on hand, not even necessarily because of anything prophetic, but just because that's a good thing to do. It's good to be prepared. You never know when a natural disaster is going to occur. So, just in case there might be a bunch of earthquakes, and there still could be an earthquake that has nothing to do with this eclipse. You could have one in your town tomorrow even. So it's always good to have some emergency supplies in your home available in case something happens and emergency services can't get to you for a few days or longer. So I always think that's good practical advice. But as far as the actual prophetic significance, I don't know. We'll probably have to just wait and see when we get there.
If you don't mind, I'll share with you a couple of my thoughts on this, simply because this is actually, and shameless plug, apologies, this is from my new book. So I'm currently 2/3 of the way through finishing my new book, The Guardians at the Gate, and I touch on this in the book that I find it interesting that this actual eclipse coincides with the 71-year cycle of Ponsbrook, or the Devil's Comet. And the Devil's Comet appears in the constellation of Aquarius. Now, I said this before when I taught this. This is not astrology. I'm just saying in terms of the Mazzaroth. But it appears in the form of the water bucket of the water being poured out of Aquarius. And if I were to look at that, the root word, of Mayim, Hebrew, water, it actually goes into Mayim, which means nations, people, and chaos.
Yeah.
And I see that, because I would say like a micro sign of the heavens and so on points towards the macro signs of the Bible. And the Bible tells us there is an age of chaos.
Yes.
And I would see the emergence of the Antichrist, the Mr. Fix-It guy, come out of a setting of chaos, because he becomes on the scene to fix things.
Yeah.
But I want to sort of take it further, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. This is fascinating. I had no idea about any of this. So you've researched this more than I have. That's really cool. I hadn't heard about that. Oh, and I'd love to read your book when it's done.
Oh, well, do you know what? I might be really cheeky and ask you to write a foreword for it. I'll give you an advance copy and see.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, I'd love to. I'll bring you on my show and I'll have you on as a guest. It'd be fun.
Oh, fantastic. So when we look at the signs in the heavens, and we look at how stars are often likened to angelic beings, and we look at, as you said, Genesis 1:14 for signs, seasons, and times. I think that there's a lot of Christianity that will throw the baby out with the bathwater, that will go, well, no, we don't want to look at any of that. Mm-hmm. But considering the gospel story was originally told in the Mazzaroth, I don't think we can throw it out.
It's right there in Genesis 1:14. It's 4 signs. That's one of them. It's for other things too, but that's one of them.
Well, do you think that there were certain things that I noted as well, that the increased level of sunspots, for instance, and the possible cause of coronal magnifying events, CMEs. I think that America had one recently where phone service and all was shut down for a bit. Do you think that sort of plays in? Do you think that could be a prophetic sign of things to come?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I think it could, because there was a sun flare, and I don't have the exact year. I think it was something in the 1800s here in America, and it wasn't as big of a deal because there was like electric things, but basically just some phones went down, some electricity went down, but people weren't as dependent on that stuff as they are today, and we're actually due for another one of those. And if it's been predicted, and this isn't even like prophecy people, this is like scientists and stuff, like it's been predicted that if we had one like that was that size, which we are due for, if we had one like that today, it would devastate the country. Like it would devastate, like people would, like millions of people would die over it, because we are so dependent on technology and just everything electrical. We're really,
Yeah.
really dependent on that. And we're not self-reliant without it. So if and when that happens, it would be devastating. And as far as prophecy, we know things are going to get a lot worse before anything gets better.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of birth pangs there, and this doesn't even have to happen in the tribulation times. I mean, this could happen well before as part of the birth pangs or the sorrows. And so when I look at stuff like that, and when we do see, an increase in solar flares, it used to be when we were more self-reliant, solar flares have always happened. We just would have no knowledge of it because it wouldn't affect anything. We didn't have electricity. We went and hunted our own food and stuff. And if something like that were to happen again, we would have to learn how to do that all over again. And most people, well, maybe not most, but a lot of people, especially people in the big cities, wouldn't know how to survive, and that would be just absolute chaos. I mean, that could launch us into a war. I mean, that could just be chaos. So, it would depend where something like that happened. But I do think, and that's why I said before, it's always good because, I mean, scientists say this kind of event happens every 120 years or something like that.
Oh, really?
So we're already long overdue for one. So it's really good to have some emergency supplies. I mean, I say if you could have like a year's worth of stuff, where if you were locked in your house and you only had the things in your house to survive off of, if you had a year's worth, I think that's a good start. At least a few days, but I don't know how helpful that's going to be. If something like that happens, emergency services are not going to get to you. Like, you will be on your own. It's almost like Walking Dead territory at that point, just without the zombies. But so yeah, I do think that there's a prophetic significance to these things increasing more and more and more, and I think it's just part of the birth pains.
Somebody had pointed out that there's this story that's been in the news about billionaires creating their bunkers, and all of that. It's kind of, not that I'm saying they have any sort of foreknowledge of things, but just, it's interesting. I think that, this is where I want to take this, if you don't mind.
Sure.
When we see things like this, and we're looking at the physical manifestation of what really sort of bogs down to spiritual existence, like an interdimensional existence that we had sort of discussed beforehand. The idea that when I was talking to L.A. Marzulli about things like this, we were talking about how, if we talk about UFOs are, and if they're, the idea of that, they're not traveling from distant planets, because if they travel at the speed of light, they'd be dead before they got here. But the idea of being in one dimension and just popping into another dimension, I believe, is biblical. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Oh yeah, I absolutely agree. We see that in Ezekiel. We see that all over in the Bible. I think every time there's an angelic manifestation, that's what's happening. We know for sure angels aren't from another planet; they're from heaven. But the thing about heaven is, like, we tend to, and we always have, we tend to like look up and then think like heaven is up there somewhere. And I think the reason for that, I don't think it's not up in space. We know what's up there. There's space, there's planets, there's stars. We're not going to find a physical location up there that is heaven. But how else do we think of an extra dimension? So we have three dimensions that we have access to. We have, like, forward and back, that's one dimension. Side to side, that's another. Up and down. Well, the one that we have the least access to is up. So of course that's where we're going to look for anything kind of mystical or spiritual or anything like that. Well, I believe that heaven, angels are made up of extra dimensions than that. So 4 dimensions and above. And for this part of it, I'm not talking about time as the 4th dimension. We can just put that aside. I mean, time is dimensional. It is one-dimensional as far as we know. So, but there's 2 categories that we know of dimensions of existence. There's space and time, and they are linked. They are linked somehow. There might even be some way where in some way they're kind of the same thing. But at least just in terms of how to categorize these things, we have time and space. So only looking at space, not looking at time right now. We have access to these 3 dimensions. Well, we also have a spiritual part of us that like calls us. Like, God says that He puts eternity in the hearts of man. There's something in us where we know we're even people that want to deny it, we intrinsically know that there is something more to us than just our three-dimensional body and brain. There's something, there's some spiritual battery in there that's the real us. And this is, this is just more of a vehicle to get around in this world. Just like if I want to drive in the road, I got to get on a car.
Yeah.
I got to get in a car, not on a car. That's a little dangerous. Fun though. But so we kind of just intrinsically have that idea. And it takes somebody, spending their lives convincing themselves that's not the case for them to not believe in that. But when you look at all cultures, I mean, every culture in the world has some form of gods and spirit. They all have some understanding of it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, those have been tainted and corrupted through fallen angels and stuff like that. But still, nobody questions that there's a spirit realm. So how would we think about that? Well, the way that I think about it is I didn't make this up. I've actually first heard this from Chuck Missler, and then I actually read the book that it came from like the 1800s or early 1900s or something, called Flatland. And the way to understand higher dimensions is to think of the three-dimensional world as the higher dimension, and then think of what a two-dimensional world would be like in relation. So let's say there's a two-dimensional world. It's basically just a flat plane. There's no up or down. And there's beings in this world, and it's everywhere. It's actually a part of our world. It's one slice of our world. If we think about a three-dimensional world as just slices of two-dimensional planes stacked on top of each other.
Okay.
It's like some high school geometry, but if we think of it like that, well, one of those slices would be one flatland universe, we could say.
Yeah.
And let's say there's living beings on that live there called Flatlanders, and they're just simple shapes, circles and squares and stuff. Well, if Flatland was right here in front of me, and if there was a flatland two-dimensional being who has no access to up or down, well, when he looks straight forward, all he's going to see is a line of there'll be like little color segments and stuff, but all he's going to see is a line. It would be like if you blocked your vision and just tried to see through something really thin. It'd be kind of like that. So he doesn't have access to up or down. Well, if I wanted to visit him, what could I do? Well, I don't need technology to breach his space at all. I already kind of am part of his space, but I'm so much more than that. So if I wanted to interact with him, I could put my finger in Flatland right in front of him. Now, what would that look like to him? To him, he can't see the whole finger. He would only see the slice that's in front of him. So first he would see nothing, before he would just see his normal world. But the second that my finger breached his space, he would see a point in space right in front of him open up, and then he would see this line, or really it'd be a circle. But to him, he can only stare forward, so he'd see this line kind of grow, and it would be really weird and unnatural to him. He wouldn't know, like, where did this come from? It appeared out of nowhere, and then if I pulled my finger out, this line would shrink and just disappear. So it's all about perspective. So, and there's a whole bunch of thought exercises that could be done with that, but that's kind of like the basic gist of it. Like if I, let's say I have a cube, and if I want to explain to a Flatlander or show a Flatlander a cube, well, he doesn't have access to up or down, so he's not going to be able to understand. I could put the cube onto Flatland, and he could search around it, and he could notice that it's a square, just like. But he would have to travel around it, or he'd have to like turn it or something to see all the sides of it. Just like we can't look at a cube and see all sides of it at once. We can only see the part that we're looking at. So if we want to get the full picture of the cube, we have to turn it around and stuff. Flatlander, same thing with a square. So he'd have to go around the square, but he would be able to piece together, oh, that's a square. Okay. But how would I be able to tell him it's more than that? Like it's actually a lot more than that. Because I can't use up and down language. He's not going to understand that. Well, one method is you could, in a sense, unfold the cube into, it would be six separate six connected squares in the shape of a cross. So you know, you could fold the two sides down, fold the top down, and then fold the bottom and the other side down. He could make out the shape of the cross, but and in that way you give him the most amount of information possible for a two-dimensional being to understand, but he's still not going to be able to piece together in his head what the full form of this thing looks like. In a sense, you could say he sees in part. You know, he's looking through a mirror darkly. You know, he can kind of see it, but he can't really put it together. Well, what's really interesting, there's actually a term for that. It's called extra-dimensional unfolding. And scientists use that idea to try to understand what a fourth dimensional object would look like. So if there was what's called a hypercube, which is a cube in 4 dimensions, if one section of a hypercube were to breach our space, it would just look like a cube to us. Now, if that were unfolded in a sense, we would have a series of 8 cubes shaped in the cross with 2 extra arms. Now, we can understand that shape. It's called a tesseract. We can understand that shape, but we can't piece together what that looks like folded up in a 4th dimensional space. Well, what's really interesting is in the book of Ezekiel, we actually get an example of extra-dimensional unfolding. This is why this vision is so weird and fascinating to a lot of people. When Ezekiel is seeing the 4 angels, the angels, they have 4 heads. Their wings are like fused to each other. It has language like all their legs come down to a single hoof. And they're melded. You can even look in the original Hebrew, and it's like they're melded together. It's really weird. Yeah. But it makes perfect sense if what's happening is these beings, in a sense, are being unfolded, because it takes a little bit of imagination for this. But so we explained the 4th dimensional hypercube so imagine if you have the 4th dimensional hypercube, you unfold that to the tesseract shape, which is the cross with the 2 extra arms. Now let's say you want to unfold that again for the Flatlander. You can do that, but you're going to have some of those squares overlapping other squares. They're going to be melded. They're going to be taking up the same 2-dimensional space. So we see that in Ezekiel with these angels. I think those angels have to be at least 5th dimensional, if not more, beings. And I don't mean in some weird new agey energy vibration kind of way. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about just scientifically how many dimensions at least would they have to have. You don't really get a lot of the melding effect if it's only 1 dimension down, but you do start to get it with 2 and more. So those angels that are all melded together, well, Ezekiel wrote that 2,600 years ago. He didn't know anything about quantum theory, or he didn't know anything about like extra dimensional hypotheses. I mean, this is all really new stuff today. And it's all been documented with mathematics that this is how this would have to work. Yet here he is recording extra dimensional unfolding right there in the book of Ezekiel. So I believe that every time there is an angelic, manifestation, and they're not all weird like that, I do also believe that, angels have access to some kind of just normal 3-dimensional body. I don't know how it works, but where they can, interact in the world, and you would just think that they're people. The Bible tells us that. Yeah. So I think that can happen, but I think Ezekiel was given that vision for a specific reason for him in his time, definitely, but also something that we can pull from today in our time. Like, there's no way the prophet Ezekiel was a quantum physicist. He would not have been able to make that up. That would have been impossible. So it shows like how accurate the Bible is. The other way to go with this too is through UFOs, because there's a lot of people that claim. And again, these are not quantum physicists that are claiming these. These are just regular people like me and you. But they'll have a sighting, and they'll say, not always, but they'll say like, yeah, this UFO, it just grew out of nowhere, and it looked like a sphere, and it floated around, and then it just shrank and disappeared. Well, that is impossible in 3-dimensional space. But if it was a hypersphere, all it did was just pass through our 3-dimensional universe for a second, just like if I dropped a ball through Flatland, the Flatlander would see a point in space that grew into a circle and then shrank back down to a point and then to nothing as the ball passed through. So we get those same, and this is fascinating to me. We get those same reports from UFO reports and things, which tells me I think those things are angelic in nature, not necessarily good angelic. I'm sure there's good guys and bad guys, but I think a lot of these sightings, they're seeing extra dimensional appearances, and they just don't know it because these are just regular layman people like me and you that are just trying to live their lives and go to their jobs and feed their families, and then they see this incredible thing. And they're describing it exactly how they see it. And the point is, there's no way they could make it up to be that exact with like modern quantum theory. There's just no way. And there's so many sightings like that, and they're increasing, and they've been increasing for a long time. So I think the more this goes on, we could say the veil is thinning. The further in time that we march on, I think these things are going to continue. And then at some point, I think that they're actually going to just have full access and be here and be able to interact with us fully. And I think that that's kind of what we read about in tribulation time in the book of Revelation and Daniel.
Could this then be, when you think about this in the terms of, like, if you look at 2 Kings 6 and Elisha's servant's eyes being opened and seeing the heavenly host surrounding the Sumerian army, could this be, if we go back to the Garden of Eden, how Adam and Eve would have originally been able to view things? That we have this weird moment where it says their eyes are now opened, but what seems to be happening when their eyes are opened is that they're limited to a physical plane in what they see. To some extent, that's the way I've always read that. And I know Chuck Missler talked about 11 different dimensions and all of this thing. Do you think that previously in the Garden of Eden, we were able to possibly see in a different way, as in see interdimensionally to some extent?
I've wondered about that too. I'm not 100% sure. I definitely think it's possible. And what's cool about the 11 dimension thing is that's if you start with one. But when we realize that single point, because one dimensional is just one point. That single point needs a space to exist in. So that's actually called the zeroth dimension in quantum physics. That's the space that contains everything else. If you add that all up, that's 12 dimensions. And that's really cool because, like, in the Bible, that seems to signify like divine government and like divine creation, stuff like that. But as far as like, it would not surprise me if it turned out that they could see more than what we can now. And the only reason I'm a little bit hesitant is and I don't know, that it very well could be, so I'm not saying that's not a good theory. Like I said, it wouldn't surprise me. The only thing is, like, God created a three-dimensional earth with three-dimensional animals, three-dimensional creation, a three-dimensional universe, for what seems to be a three-dimensional creation, even man. Now, we do have a spirit, so that could totally blow that out of the water, because we definitely for sure have a part of us that's extra dimensional, like, without a doubt. I believe that the soul, spirit, I believe there's probably a soul and a spirit. I think that there's a spiritual type of body, but then our spirit is the real us that goes beyond, bodies and things. It goes beyond like vehicles for different places. But so he did create us with that. So it's very possible. And then the other thing too, and another reason why I'm a little hesitant is just because there are people that will take that idea and they will go so far with it. They'll say that Adam and Eve were basically like indescribable superheroes, where they're flying around and they're going to other planets and they're astral projecting and all of this. Like, a lot of New Age stuff does that. So, and I'm not saying that the theory that Adam and Eve might have been able to experience extra dimensions is inherently New Age. I'm not saying that at all. But and New Age does have a tendency to borrow but steal, really. Steal ideas that actually have validity to it and then twist it around to their own things. They do this with quantum physics all the time. It's like that line from Ant-Man. Do you guys just put quantum in the front of everything? When you read a New Age book, that's what you get. There's quantum healing, quantum light, quantum vibrations, quantum energy, quantum this, quantum that, and it's like they talk about it more than even quantum scientists do. So I definitely think it's possible. Like, it would not surprise me one bit if originally God created Adam and Eve to be able to maybe not I don't think their physical bodies could
Yeah.
like travel dimensions, but maybe they could in their spirit or through
Mhm.
just through their eyes. Maybe they could see and interact with it. I mean, they were able to see angels and stuff, and
Yeah.
we can too. But it seems to be a very after the fall, it seems to be a very terrifying experience to see an angel. Uh, every time you read in the Bible, I mean, they freak out, and then the angel has to like calm them down and say, "Don't be afraid. It's all right." Um, just like I imagine if a flatlander were to see me, that would probably be like horrifying. And we don't really see that with Adam and Eve. I mean,
No.
they weren't scared of the serpent. They weren't scared, they weren't freaking out when they walked with God or anything.
Yeah.
It says that there were angels and a flaming sword put to guard the Garden of Eden afterwards. We don't know if there was any interaction between Adam and Eve in those, but it seems like they were already used to that kind of spiritual existence, and it didn't freak them out or scare them. So I think it's possible, but I don't know if the Bible gives us enough information to know for sure, but it's definitely fun to talk about.
Do you think, well, the way I'd sort of look at that is thinking
Mhm.
that possibly there is a mercy in that we don't see angels all of the time.
Yeah.
When you
Oh,
go
it would
back,
freak us out. We would be
yeah,
in pure terror all the time now if we were able to see that. We
but when
can't
you,
handle it anymore.
I know, and when you go back to the time of the Garden of Eden, and you go back in biblical history and look back, I find it really interesting that so right now we have a North Star. We have
Yeah.
Polaris as our North Star. But that wasn't a North Star until 500 AD. Before that, and dating back until the time of creation was Thuban, and Thuban was this star in the constellation of Draco the dragon. And Thuban's name means large great snake.
Oh wow.
And it just, for me, that I find that when you look at what 500, well, I want to ask this in context of, I know that you know these calendars that just boggle my mind, but when you get to 500 AD, we see a sort of a settlement of orthodoxy in the church. We see all the different councils. We see like 476 AD, the fall of the Roman Empire, and now the church is the main focus. Does 500 AD by any chance center into any of the calendars? Like, as in, is it a noteworthy part?
Yeah, it might be. So the ancient Hebrews, ancient Hebrews, before they adopted the lunar calendar, they split everything up the way that we have like decades and centuries and millennia.
Mm,
They had their own version of that. So they had 7 years, which was a Shemitah. Um, they had jubilees. They had onas, which is 500 years, and then they had
yeah.
ages, which were 2,000 years. So if you think about roughly the end of the age of Torah, roughly was somewhere between like 0 and 100 AD. I mean, you could pinpoint it to about 70 AD, but it's somewhere around there. So somewhere around, just kind of roughly, 500 AD would have been roughly one ona after
Hmm.
that, and they did put a lot of importance in these in these time divisions. And I
Yeah.
mean, there's even entire prophecies based on these things all throughout the Dead Sea Scrolls, especially in the Book of Enoch, and then we get them in the Bible too. So it could be that it was the end of the the end of the first ona of the church age, where things were settling down and getting settled. It very well could have been that.
Hmm.
Or it might not have been anything at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, the first thing that came to mind when you said 500 years was their Ona divisions.
Okay.
So which they believed that in all of human history there would be 14 Ona divisions. They believed in a 7,000 total years of creation as we know it, from the time of the original creation to the time of the new heavens and new earth.
Hmm.
And they put a lot of importance on the divisions of ages for sure. And then next would be onas, and then you got jubilees and shemitahs. So yeah, that could have had something to do with it.
See, it strikes me, and I was sort of thinking the way my thought process went was Isaiah 14, that the enemy tries to present himself in the most northern part of the congregation, and if you saw the stars and the sun and the moon for sign seasons and times, and you saw that happen, that there was this change of the North Star,
Yeah.
you know, is that a representative of that? And if that's a representative of that, are we in, what does that mean spiritually? What does that mean for us going forward? And I kind of then likened that, and I started to think about this in terms of the interdimensionality that we were talking about there. If the enemy is, and I'm talking about the enemy as in the pluralistic enemy.
Yeah,
as in
I use it like that
Genesis
too.
6, yeah. If the enemy is trying to continually influence creation, I know it sounds a wee bit new agey, but I know Psalm 24 calls it gates and doors and windows, but portals. Do you think that there's certainly around the world placement of portals?
Yes. Yeah, and I don't think that's new agey at all. I think that's well, even the Bible talks about portals, like I mean, it doesn't use the word, but when you read the description, it's like, okay, that's a portal. Like Elijah with the whirlwind. I mean, if you think about a whirlwind tipped on its side, what does that look like? Or Ezekiel with what he saw something like that too. I believe that. I don't exactly know what to do with portals, but I do believe that from time to time, even in our own 3 dimensions of space and time. And you wouldn't need a 4th dimension of space for this to work, for it to connect.
Yeah.
But I do believe that it might even be, obviously when God sends an angel to somebody, if there's a portal involved, God's directing that. But I do think sometimes these things just open up naturally. And I don't know the process or why, but I think that sometimes, especially in the sky, I did an interview with a guy named Bruce Gernon. Okay. And he's not a Christian or anything, but as far as I know, I hope he is. We should pray for him. But I fully believe his story. He did not seem sensational to me, and it mirrored so closely what another friend of mine, Gary Stearman, has a story about pretty much the same thing. But Bruce, he was flying from like Florida to one of the islands, and it was supposed to take a certain amount of time with a certain, so he had the gas for it, and he'd done this flight many times. Well, he flew through this cloud, and then all of a sudden it turned green, and he was seeing these swirls all around and these weird lightning flashes and things. And so he's like freaking out because he'd never seen anything like this before. And but it ended. He was fine, and he found out he was way further than he was supposed to be. He was basically almost at his destination. So he landed the plane. He got there way earlier than he was supposed to. They even checked the gas and proved like it is impossible for you to make this trip using that little gas. So he believes that what happened was he just happened to go into a naturally forming portal that breached space and time a little bit, which again, for that to work, you would need there needs to exist the 4th dimension of time. Otherwise there's nowhere for that bend to happen into. Just like if you take a piece of paper, if you take Flatland and you try to bend it, well, the Flatlander probably won't notice anything different, but unless he travels all the way, like if you make it into a tube, let's say, if he travels all the way around, well, he's going to notice like I'm ending up in the same place that I started at, and he's going to be totally confused. It'll be like, those Lost in the Woods movies that we see where it's like, we passed this tree a whole bunch of times. Like, what's going on?
That sounds like me on every trip.
Yeah. Me too. Oh my gosh, I'm terrible with directions. My wife makes fun of me about it all the time. Yeah. But yeah, so like if you had Flatland and you took some of it and you made like a tube out of it, well, the Flatlander would go around in circles, but he doesn't have any conceptual understanding of a 3rd dimension. So to him, he's just traveling with Flatland, but he's going in circles. So you need that 3rd dimension for it to bend into. If there was no 3rd dimension, you can't bend Flatland because there wouldn't be any space to bend it into. Well, the same thing with the 3rd dimension. So if there is a 4th dimensional space, and I believe there has to be. I think there's 12 actually altogether. I think 12. But if that happens, it's possible that just naturally some of these bends and some of these curves just occur because nature is weird and space is weird and the sky is weird, and I don't know what causes them. I have no theory on that, no clue. But I think sometimes these things can happen, and if somebody flies through one or There have been times where people have been driving in cars and they've reported getting to their destination way faster than they were
Well,
supposed to.
it's like Act 8, isn't it? You know that Philip is one place and then he ends up in Azotus and just
Yes,
in a blink of an eye. You know.
that's a perfect example. Yeah, and I think that's exactly what's happening there. So I think that probably naturally these things happen at random from time to time. I don't think there's really any way to measure it or predict it because we're talking about something that would be happening in an extra dimension of space that we don't really have any way of detecting or manipulating or doing anything with. Just like, I mean, what possible flatland technology would allow a flatlander to control his own space where he could bend it himself? I mean, I guess it's possible, but scientists today say that in order to do something like that, if it's even possible, you would need the energy of something like a billion suns. Like,
Yeah.
it's just totally. So I think sometimes they just happen naturally in really localized places, in the world, probably all over the universe. And I mean, some of the missing 411 cases, some of the people that have gone missing in the woods, like that, it's literally like they'll be with somebody and then they turn around for 1 second and they're gone, and then they find the person dead like 5 miles away on a mountain where it looked like that they were dropped from the sky. And like, how do we explain that? So it's possible that these things could happen naturally, just by chance, by random. It's probably not a really common occurrence. And somebody like Bruce Gernon just happened to go through one and actually survive it. It didn't launch him out, near Pluto or something, so that's good. But also Gary Stearman has a story like that too. He saw a UFO, and he was having some engine trouble or something, and there was a UFO that appeared next to him. And Gary, I've talked to him about this personally, and he said he's gotten the sense that was like the good guys. He didn't think that was a demonic thing, or like he thinks that good angels probably have access to these vehicles too. And you might ask, well, why does an angel need a vehicle? Well, a flatlander might wonder that about us. Like, if we can breach flatland anytime we want, why on earth would we need a thing like a car to get around? So it's kind of the same thing. That might just be how it works. But either way, they apparently this UFO. I don't know if I haven't heard the story in a few years, but I think it might have shined something on the plane, and it helped him land. But when he landed, he got to his destination. It was the same as Bruce Gernon. He got to his destination a lot sooner than he was supposed to. And they even measured the gas and were able to show, like, there's no way this can be physically possible. So so there might have been some kind of portal activity with that too. Now, I don't think any of that's new agey. Where it does get new agey is when people try to say, well, I can I can astral project, and I can go into portals, or I can create portals with my mind, and I can make this happen. And that's where I'm like, no. I think that's where it's like, no, that's getting into like sorcery, witchcraft kind of stuff. We're not meant to mess around with that kind of stuff. With technology, if we develop something that might get us from A to B a little bit faster, because we can take advantage of fourth dimensional space, like in Star Trek or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm okay with that. I don't know. It depends on what all would be involved. That might not necessarily be in the witchcraft category, but the second somebody says that, like, they can use their quantum energy or vibrations to vibrate through this portal they created with their mind or something, that's where it gets new agey. But no, nothing you said was new agey at all. I absolutely believe portals exist.
A few weeks ago, I took my family and we went on sort of a recon trip, and we done this trip because sort of in prep for something L.A. Marzulli's doing over here, but also it kind of coincides with some of the chapters in my book. And we visited a place called Onnagat in Irish. It is the birthplace of Samhain. It is the birthplace of Halloween. Okay. And it's a cave. And the story goes in that they have, over here there was the Tuatha De Danann, which were the god tribe. These were a group of people, this might sound familiar, who taught mankind how to do metallurgy, how to do witchcraft and sorcery. And in the midst of a battle, they disappeared into this cave. And so I decided that it would be a good idea to go down the cave and just see. It's called the Gates of Hell.
Oh, wow.
And I took my this doesn't sound like good parenting. I took my 12-year-old son, and
You got Jesus with you, though. I mean, it'll be all
yeah.
right.
Well, I'll tell you that I'll be completely honest with you. I got about you have to you can't stand on the entrance. You have to slide into this cave. Goes
Hmm.
completely underground. Drops about um, 27 feet or so, but you just slide in. And so I stop maybe about 10 feet in and start to freak out because I've got my camera.
Hmm.
And you know the way you see on all these ghost shows and all of that, these little orbs
Yeah.
and all of that appear. So this starts coming on to my camera, and I'm going. I say to my son Charlie, I don't really want to go any further. And then sounds really bad because I've shown people this video. He passes me. It's okay, and just continues on down. So I was kind of provoked to go with him, but but
That's awesome.
I kind of think of it in these terms, that you see that. So that's colloquially called the gates of hell. You go
Hmm.
to Caesarea Philippi, you've got the gates of hell, the cave of Pan. You go around the world, and there are a lot of different places sort of equated to the same thing.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm sort of thinking, I know that I think it's First Enoch 76 talks about 12 different portals or windows from heaven. Do you think that if we were to take the UFO subject, do you think that it works off that sort of thing? That, that if there are these areas, this is where we're seeing popping in and popping out? Because
Yes.
I sent LA a message, and I said I was really shocked to find there's an observatorium in the same area, 30 miles away, and the biggest reports of UFOs in Ireland are in that area.
Hmm.
And I don't know if you would attest that that could be a thing of how people are, well, how these B'nai Elohim, these fallen angels, or whatever, how they travel into the
Yeah.
next.
Yeah. Definitely. It very well could be, because if you think about it, like, and it could even just be practical for them, because,
Yeah.
like, technically an extra dimensional being should be able to enter our space anywhere they wanted. Just like I can, put my finger anywhere I want in Flatland, as long as I
Hmm.
can access it somewhere. But when you think about, like, how travel and how all this stuff works, it doesn't really, we don't really do that. Like, technically I can get to anywhere on the earth from wherever I am,
Yeah.
if I'm willing to walk or sail or drive long enough. But even with the driving, I mean, we have specific paths that we use, and they're kind of arbitrary, but
Hmm.
that's just what's there. That's what's available. If I wanted, if I really wanted to, like, get over to where you are, and I wanted to just take a straight line there, yeah, technically, that's the shortest distance, but it would be really difficult for me to do that.
Yeah.
I would have to drive to an airport, fly, probably take connecting flights, and it would be zigzag all over the place. And so even in our own space, we have these specific hubs where we go travel to other places. I would expect it probably works like that in higher
Hmm.
dimensional space too. There's probably certain hubs where, just for whatever reason, it's more convenient to take those, we'll call them portals, to take those hubs to get to where,
Yeah.
to get to our space, and then from there they go wherever they want, do whatever they want. Just like with us in the airport. So it
Hmm.
wouldn't surprise me if there are these natural, 12 hubs or whatever, these portals that exist around the planet, where for whatever reason it's just more convenient, or it's more practical, or maybe even it's just more spiritually meaningful, like,
Yeah.
for them to use these. It's more like, almost like sacred, for,
Hmm.
because I believe even the enemy thinks things are sacred, just their version of sacred is
Yeah.
like what we
Yeah.
would call evil.
Yeah.
They make up their own rules, they make up their own things, and I believe, so I believe that there is a literal gates of hell.
Hmm.
But when the nations got dispersed, all of in the whole Tower of Babel incident, all of these people took this knowledge and they had it in their own languages all
Yeah.
over the world. But now they're under the influence of all these fallen angels, which we get from Deuteronomy. I forget the chapter and verse, but where it
32.
says that God
Yeah.
divided the nations up according to the sons of God. So these fallen entities that these people are now following, which the whole story behind that, if somebody's not familiar, In the Bible, it basically just says that people built like a large tower, very tall tower, and God said, you know, if we let them keep doing this, they're going to be able to achieve what they want to achieve. So God
Mhm.
dispersed the nations. The reason that was a sin for them was because God told them to be fruitful, multiply, spread over the earth. He didn't want everybody congregating into
Yeah.
one area. And if you're wondering why, look at any big city. Like, look at any big city. They always turn, like, they always get really corrupt, and they always turn to the left. Like, is there a conservative, like, really big city like New York anywhere in the world? Not that I know of.
Yeah.
And so we're not really meant to be in these big cities, but they did it anyway. And of course, they got really corrupt under one ruler named Nimrod.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's like a foreshadow of the Antichrist. There's many of them in the Bible. I think that's one of them. So God said basically, and to put more context to that, if we go into books like Jasher and some of the extra biblical stuff, we get a little bit more to the story, where we learn. And again, it's not scripture, so take it with a grain of salt. But we learn the reason that they built this was because Nimrod had gotten them all worried that God was going to send a flood again. So they wanted to worship the false gods from the past, which were the Nephilim and their fallen angelic fathers. They wanted to worship those. They wanted to enter heaven, put their idols in heaven, and they wanted to kill God.
Mhm.
Don't know how they thought they were going to do that, but they were really, really deceived. And they were under what's called an apostasy. They were under, at the end of every age. So this would have been, the Tower of Babel incident happened at the end of the first age. And there's 4 in total. And at the end of every age, so there was the age of creation, which was from the beginning of creation to the call of Abraham.
Yeah.
The second age was the Torah age, which call of Abraham to about 70 AD. And then now we're in the age of grace, the church age, which according to the Dead Sea Scrolls is from right around 70 AD to 2075 AD.
Yeah.
And then there's the millennial reign, which would be 2075 to 2030 or 2075 AD.
Yeah.
And again, we don't know the exact dates exactly, but it's roughly that. Well, at the end of each of these ages, there's an apostasy. We can work backwards. The millennial age, we know there's one last great battle. Satan is let loose for a little while because he was put in the bottomless pit. He's set loose for a little while and he deceives the nations, and there's a big battle. So there's an apostasy even in the Sabbath age, like the millennial reign of Christ age. There's we know that there's going to be an apostasy, and I think we're in it now. There's an apostasy at the end of our age, and we read how that culminates in the tribulation. Age of Torah, absolutely apostasy. All these factions of Jews were killing each other over really minor theological differences, and they killed Jesus. They didn't know their Messiah. They had all the evidence of when he was going to appear. The Essenes knew it, but the Pharisees and Sadducees denied it. They were under an apostasy. Well, at the end of the first age, the Tower of Babel incident, that was an apostasy as well. So an apostasy is kind of like a spiritual madness. It's a spiritual craziness where people just go crazy. And I mean, man, look at the world today. I mean, the world's insane. So God said, all right, basically putting this all together with Deuteronomy, the Sons of God thing, Genesis, with the Tower of Babel incident, and filling in some details from Jasher, and I think some of this might come from Jubilees as well. But basically, what it seems like what happened was God said, fine, you want your false gods? I'm not letting you into heaven. You're not going to come into heaven and wage war on me, but fine. You're going to get scattered because I told you to do it anyway, and you're not doing it. I'm going to make you do that, but you get to take your false gods with you. You want your false gods? You don't want me? Fine. You can have them. But what's amazing about that is God always, always provided a way for anybody who wanted to come back to him. After he did that, there was always a way that any Gentile, and this would be, in the Torah age, but any Gentile could become a proselyte and be saved. Anybody who wanted to, Jew or Gentile, always had that opportunity. So all of these other religions, that's why all these other religions, all these other cultures, that's why they have the same stories. They all have like a gates of hell thing. They all have a flood myth, but each one is twisted a little bit. It has its own flavor because each one was taught by their false gods that they chose instead of the actual true God. So that to me, that fully explains why there's so many different religions, why they all have the same basic stories, but they all have these really weird differences. And the differences are minute compared to how similar the stories themselves are. But the one thing that isn't minute, the one thing that is absolutely different from Judaism, Christianity, and obviously people know that Christianity came from Judaism. Actually, Christianity is just an extension of Judaism. It's just an extension of Judaism in our age, and it's for Jew and Gentile. Gentiles were welcomed into that broadly instead of only individually. Excuse me. What makes it all different is every single other religion, every single other teaching from fallen angels have taught people that they have to work for their salvation. They have to do something to earn and gain their own salvation. And Judaism and Christianity is the only religion where it's like, no, you're not good enough. You can't earn your salvation. Like, you can't. You need somebody to take your punishment in your place. And that's where, like, modern Judaism obviously branches off. When I say Judaism, I mean ancient Judaism, the ones that actually believed in a coming Messiah and knew what, they might not have known all of the details, but they roughly knew, okay, faith in the Messiah, that's what we need. Like, it says that Abraham's faith was credited to him as righteousness. So it means that Abraham wasn't righteous on his own, but his faith is what was credited to him. Just like, so every age has had the same thing. The only path to heaven is through the Messiah. So we have that. We know works aren't going to do it. And we even have unfortunately, we've got a lot of Christian factions or factions that call themselves Christian that preach a lot of work stuff. And they say, oh, well, you got to do this and this and this and this though too. That's not right. That's the complete antithesis. That's what every other religion in the world teaches. But Christianity and ancient Judaism, like they're the only ones that have because in Deuteronomy it says, he gave the nations according to the sons of God, but Israel is God's allotment. That's the one that God took for himself. All these other fallen angels, okay, everybody, you want your false gods, fine, you got them. You have the earth, but I'm taking Israel. Like, this is my allotment. And then he did that, taught them correctly, and that's why Christianity is so different in that one regard from every other religion. Because these other false gods, they want people to work for them. They want to be worshipped. And of course God wants to be worshipped too, but not in a selfish, self-serving way. It's because he loves us in the same way that I love my kids. I want them to obey me because I love them, not because I need the attention or I need to feel like I'm in control. It has nothing to do with that. It's because I love them so much and I know what's better for them than they know. So I want them to listen to me. It's the same with God. You don't get that from the other religions. Their gods aren't really like that. Actually, a lot of them are really petty. A lot of them seem pretty human, actually, like in their pettiness and stuff. And so they're corrupt. So that's what sets the God of Israel apart from every other god. So I mean, if there's anybody out there who has not even given Christianity a second thought, and if you're watching this for some reason, look into that. Why is Christianity? Why is ancient Judaism? Why are the people of Yahweh, the God of the Bible, so different? Not in them individually, personally, because you can find a whole bunch of people calling themselves Christians that they're just not anybody I would want to hang out with. But why are the teachings so different? And really look into that and pray about it. And I believe God will show you.
Amen. Guys, if you have questions, type question first and then start putting your questions up. I have a theory that I want to run past you just as you were talking there, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
So when I was doing this recon trip, I was talking to one of our guides. We went to a place called Brunaboyne. Now, Brunaboyne's older than the pyramids. It's 5,300 years old, and it's an amazing megalithic structure. And our guide had this necklace, and I thought, the swirls, these concentric swirls. So I said to him, "Oh, are you a fan of?" I was joking. Are you a fan of True Detective? Because in True Detective, that TV show, there's these swirls. And he said, I don't know what you mean. I think he didn't know what it sort of represented. He thought it meant the sun. But I went away and started researching and looking at it, and it's the swirls that sort of represent the Milky Way, the solar system, and or the galaxy. And it got me thinking. There is an end time apostasy. And I believe the end time apostasy, as Romans 1 talked about, that, because we do not keep God in our knowledge, he left us to our debased way of thinking. And we started in, I think it's verse 25, worshipping the creation rather than the creator.
Yes.
So my theory, and I want to run it past you, is that you have all of this, you had a dysphoria of, from Genesis 11. And you have the sort of false religions of these fallen angels taught all the way around the world. Do you think there's this swirl is found in Native American caves? Yep. It's found all the way around the world.
Everywhere.
Do you think that there's a concerted effort toward end times to bring in the likes of creation worship the universe? How many programs do we watch and they say, oh, thank the universe, pray to the universe, and all of this?
Yeah.
And it's sort of centered around the last sort of apostasy before the millennial kingdom, that to bring in that Romans 1 worship. Do you think that could actually be a plan?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, because we see that increasing. I mean, there's an idea that 20 years ago seemed really silly, but it's really popular now, where, human beings are just a cancer on the earth, and the earth is actually this organism, and it's trying to expel the cancer off of it. And that, that's why we get all these natural disasters. There's no evidence to support that. Like, nothing. Yeah. The earth is the earth. It's not a sentient being, and then, but you get so many people where that's appealing to them because their mind is caught in this spiritual apostasy that they don't even know is existing. Yeah. But it's like you said, like God's giving them up to their debased mind. And you see like famous actors and stuff say stuff like that. So there's definitely the whole green movement, total earth. It's a combination of earth worship and greed, like insane greed, because there's a lot of money to be made in the green movement. Yeah, it's like the green movement for money and for earth. So yeah, I definitely see that increasing more and more, and this anti-human sentiment. I mean, you hear these people just talk so bad about humanity as if it's some like they're really like introspective and deep, like it's some trendy thing, and it's like, man, you're just saying you're a human being, like. And usually, I don't know how it is in Ireland, but in America, usually you get that from young white liberals. Yeah, you get most of those saying stuff like that. And it's like and over here, it is like anything against any other race is like the worst thing ever. But if it's a white male, especially a white Christian male, or a conservative white male, then it's like it's totally fine. So I always want to ask, like when somebody thinks that, it's like, okay, you're saying humanity is a cancer. You're saying that about black people. You're saying that about Asians. All these people that you pretend that you're really trying to protect and speak for, which they don't need to be spoken for. They can speak for themselves, and I think they do a pretty good job of it. You're saying that about them too, but they're not thinking that. What they're thinking is basically white Christian guys. And there's a famous prophecy, when you see kingdom against kingdom and nation against nation. Well, one of those, and I forget which, I think nation just means like countries, but the kingdom, or it might be the other way around. One of those, the Greek word is ethnos, and what it's talking about is ethnic groups, like ethnic, like when you see ethnic groups against ethnic groups. And oh my gosh, I don't know how it is in Ireland, but we are seeing that massively here, like worse than it's almost ever been. I mean, it's horrible. Like black conservatives cannot get a platform. They don't get recognized during Black History Month, and white people, we're not allowed to be proud of anything in our heritage. Like we're just not allowed. We get called racist if we even bring anything up, like, what, and I think the whole race thing is stupid anyway. I mean, really, when people think race, what they're thinking is culture. Race is just the amount of melanin in your skin. I mean, you may as well make a big deal about hair color or eye color. What they're really talking about is culture. But every other race in this country, in America, is proud of proud of the achievements of their people. And fine, that's great. I think that's totally a fine thing. But if a white person does it, I mean, we are like shunned and doxxed and treated like just the worst bigots ever. And that's the culture that, like, most people in America are white. I'm not saying that's good or bad. It's just that it just is the fact.
Yeah.
And a lot of this rhetoric, it's not even coming from any other races. A little bit of it is, but most of it's coming from white people, usually young white liberals, who think that they're so great they can speak for these other races. And it's like, isn't that the real racism? Like, I think they're doing just fine speaking for themselves.
Yeah.
There's a lot of black conservatives I love listening to. I mean, they're great. A lot of black preachers, Asian ones too. White, I don't care what race they are, what culture they come from. I just want to know, are they preaching truth or not? And unfortunately, that view is dwindling down a lot. Especially in the mainstream in this country. There's still a ton of conservatives, ton of Christians, but we don't get represented in the mainstream media at all, ever.
No.
So it makes it seem like that the country is just full of leftists and there's only a few conservatives here and there. But actually, there really is a lot more of us than there are of them. It's just we usually keep to ourselves and we're a lot more quiet about it.
Josh,
conservatives, not anything racial, but just conservatives.
Are you okay for a couple of questions? I'm aware
Absolutely.
of that. Is that okay? So I've got a question. I'm going to go to my profile first because I ignored them last time. So I've got a question here from Watchman Trevor, who's an elder in our church.
Oh, great.
Do you think that interdimensional movement is only possible in the spirit realm? You look at people who have had near-death experiences and all say pretty much the same thing, that they have left their bodies.
Well, I will say, so there's a difference between interdimensional and extra-dimensional. So
Yeah.
interdimensional just means that, well, it's like interplanetary. Like you can go from, like if we were an interplanetary species, which we're not yet, but if we were, it means that we're a species that have traveled to another planet. It doesn't necessarily mean that we lived there or that we originate from there. It just means that we have the capability to get there and back.
Yeah.
As far as, and then extra dimension or extraplanetary would be like if you were from another planet, like extraterrestrial.
Right.
That's just another way of saying extraplanetary. It just means you're from. So interdimensional movement, I think, well, like in the stories that I brought up about Bruce Gernon and Gary Stearman, they definitely, it seems like they interdimensionally traveled in their physical bodies. I don't think that we can initiate that, and I don't think we should try. I don't think that we can make that happen. Like we're not interdimensional beings. Like we're not naturally interdimensional. We're not even really naturally interplanetary, but through technology, we might get there. And that's what I was saying earlier. Like if through technology, like, do I have a problem? Like if we go and visit the moon or something, I don't know. God's not super clear on that. I mean, he really didn't like the Tower of Babel, but I don't think the problem was the height. I mean, clearly it couldn't have been. Otherwise we wouldn't be able to launch satellites.
Like a ziggurat, isn't it?
Yeah. I think there was something more going on there. I think it had to do with a lot of dark magic kind of stuff and them actually trying to enter heaven and invade heaven. Yeah. Which probably would have killed them on the spot. But so yes, I do think it's possible to physically, but again, if we're like, okay, Bruce didn't even know that he was in another dimension of space. Like it just looked like 3-dimensional space to him. Just like if the flatland example again, if I took a flat sheet of paper and there's a flatlander on it and I turned it into a tube, well, he's still on flatland. He's still thinking that he's traveling 2-dimensionally. He doesn't realize he's traveling 3-dimensionally. Just like Gary Stearman and Bruce Gernon, they didn't realize they were, for a brief time, traveling 4th-dimensionally because they were still in their own space. It's just their space was being bent. Now, he brought up near-death experiences. So what's really cool about that, there are a few near-death experiences where they come back and it's extra-dimensional perception. Like clearly, they come back, and these are laymen. These are people that they don't read quantum physics books. They don't, they have said that they were able to see everything all at once. They had access to up, down, side to side, like the way that you would expect how a 4th-dimensional being would be able to see, or a fifth dimensional or anything, how they would be able to see. Like, okay, when we look at a square on a sheet of paper, we can see all sides of it all at once, and the inside and the outside easily.
Mhm.
We don't even have to think about it. It's like it's a basic shape to us. Well, to a fourth dimensional being, they would be able to do that with like a closed box or like a closed cube. They would be able to see all sides all at once, the inside and the outside. They can see us like that. They can see all of our sides, all of everything all at once, the inside and the outside. And so some people, when they've had these near death experiences, they describe that. And it's like, how would they know to describe it like that? Because that's not something that a normal person would even think about. I mean, when I first started studying this, it just because the way that we're taught in science and stuff, we're taught really three-dimensionally based stuff.
Yeah.
You got to think of things like a little different, and it takes a while. Like, it took me not to necessarily understand the concepts. I think anybody can pretty much understand at least the concept of it, at least the broad picture of it, pretty easily. But to really get it in your head and to really understand that, I mean, it takes some time. And these are people that are just run of the mill, just regular people with regular jobs like me and you, and they come back describing this extra dimensional perception, but they don't use words like that. So yeah, I wrote all about that in a book called Afterlife. And so yeah, I definitely think that's possible. I think when we pass on, or when we're raptured, whichever comes first, I think we're going to notice there is a lot more to creation than we thought. And even then, a lot of people have said, like, when that happens, that feels more real than this does. I mean, imagine if a flatlander. Imagine if a flatlander, he thinks he's a square, but he's actually a cube, and he passes on and he realizes he's a cube, and he sees this whole world. That would feel more real to him than two-dimensional space would. I think it's going to be exactly like that. So yeah, I totally agree with all that.
Awesome. We've got another one here. And I've got my glasses this time.
All right.
Question: can some of these be holograms? Thou died to the government beefing up a UFO invasion for the rapture in place of it to fool those into believing UFOs took the church up.
Yeah, I kind of get the gist of. So there's an idea that like Project Bluebeam and this kind of stuff, that there might be holograms of UFOs to trick people. It could be. My only hesitation is you wouldn't be able to say every single UFO. You wouldn't be able to say every single one is a hologram, because these things have been physically touched. I mean, there's a physicality to at least some of them. So we can be pretty sure that the whole phenomenon can't be described by that. So then you would have to ask, if this is already happening, a project like that would be very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
And what would be the purpose? Because wouldn't it be easier to do what I think they're doing now? And I'm not saying that doesn't happen. They might do hologram stuff to trick and fool people, but wouldn't it be easier to use what's already available to them for free, which is the UFOs that are already showing up, and then just twist the dialogue and twist the interpretation, which is exactly what we're seeing now. And then as far as the rapture thing, it's kind of the same point. It's, when the rapture happens, a bunch of people are going to disappear. I think probably a lot of people are just going to naturally assume that it was aliens or something like that, and the government won't really have to spend all the money and the time and the energy to project holographic UFOs to trick people. I think they'll be able to do that more effectively just by controlling the conversation through the media, which is what they do now. So it's possible, but if I were an evil government agent in charge of all this stuff, I would say, well, let's not spend billions on that. Let's put that money somewhere else, and let's just use what we have that's just been given to us, and let's just tell them that aliens did it, and they'll believe it. So I mean, it's possible, but I'm still kind of on it. But I should also mention, I have not really thoroughly researched Project Bluebeam and all the holographic stuff. So there might be a lot of points that I'm missing that I just haven't had an opportunity to research myself.
Cool. Question: I've heard the saints can ascend and descend from heaven to earth in the 1000 millennial reign, and that people will stop. I think that stop being
Will
or
still be human.
still be human on the earth and be married. Is this true? And this would be dimensional popping into one place to another. Also, will everyone be able, as saints, to enter the three heavens?
I've wondered about this too. I'm not sure because Revelation doesn't directly tell us, but we do
Yeah.
know that there's going to be some different groups that are going to be on Earth. So there will be humans that aren't that are saved, and they okay. I'll back up. So the tribulation happens. Jesus comes back, gets rid of the false prophet and Antichrist, and now this judgment happens. Everybody who opposed Christ, everybody who's not saved, they get destroyed. You know, the angels take them and they get just annihilated. And then the birds and the animals, the wild animals, eat their bodies. So those people would have died and they went to hell. Then you have people who weren't caught up in the rapture or anything. These are people who weren't saved at the beginning of the tribulation, but they became saved during the tribulation, and they survived. Well, when they get to the judgment, they're allowed to enter into the millennium, but they're still human. They still have a sin nature, and they're still able to procreate and things like that. That's the group that repopulates the earth after the tribulation. And the way that salvation always is the same. It's Jesus is how you get saved. There's no salvation except through Jesus. But we also read that there's like sacrifices and things in the millennial reign. I believe that's all literal. Yeah. I do not think that's symbolic, but it's also not for salvation. And by the way, neither was the Old Testament sacrifices. Those weren't for salvation either. That was to deal with sin. Well, now you have Jesus ruling the earth. People are still going to sin, and this isn't us, but people are still going to sin, and that sin needs to be dealt with. It's similar to the Torah age, but there are some differences, and a lot of that is laid out in the last 9 chapters of Ezekiel. Then you have people who were, I'm a pre-trib guy. I know not everybody is, and I don't make a big deal about it, but I'm a pre-trib guy. So in my opinion, before the tribulation, and I don't know how long before, there's no way to really know, but at some time before the tribulation, we get caught up, we get raptured, and we're given our new glorified bodies. Mm-hmm. Well, we return with Christ to earth on horses when he returns. We return with him. So now that's where it's like, okay, so are we living on earth, or are we there just temporarily and we go back to heaven? I tend to lean towards we remain on earth, because God's whole plan, like the whole idea, I think, of like Revelation and the return and the new heavens, new earth, God is restoring what he originally wanted to create. And he originally created humans for the earth. Mm-hmm. I think heaven is just kind of a temporary holding place. But our real place is on earth. So during the millennium, I believe that we'll be here. And I think that that's where, when Jesus says, well, to some I give 1 city, to some I give 5 cities, depending on what we do. I think those are the rewards that we get at the Bema Seat judgment. Mm-hmm. We figure out what we're going to be doing in the millennium, and we're going to have responsibilities and jobs, but we're going to love them because we've been built for them. We've been made for them. So I believe that we are going to be the people that, depending how, and there's probably going to be Christians that, who get raptured, but they don't get any cities because of just how they live their lives or whatever.
Yeah.
So we're going to have responsibilities and things for that 1,000 years until the new creation. So during that time, do we have access to heaven? Are we able to just go to heaven whenever we want and come back? That I have no idea, and I have been wondering that ever since I've even learned about. I've been wondering that since I was like 10 years old. I don't know. It on one hand, it would seem weird that we would be cut off to it. Like, I don't think we would just be like, no, you're not allowed there anymore. Because why? But at the same time, if we're built for these duties and we're performing our duties on earth and we're serving Jesus, who's on earth as well, what reason would we have to be in heaven? I mean, I don't know. I don't know. So it's a really great question, but I don't have a solid answer. What do you think?
It makes me think of Job 1.
Mm-hmm.
And the very fact that the B'nai Ha Elohim can present themselves before God.
Yeah.
So obviously we know that the Hasatan, the deceiver, is walking the earth at this point, but he still turns up and presents himself before God. So it makes me think that there is that possibility. Like I've been for the last sort of year and a half doing a binge of everything Dr. Michael Heiser wrote.
Yeah.
And it sort of, I guess what I take from that is that the counsel of God is kind of to some extent replaced by
Yeah.
the man, man
Yep.
and the believer. And as that's the case, I would say that, there might be that ability to, I liked how it was phrased, pop in and out,
Yeah. Yeah.
But, who knows? It's one of those things that you will obviously be surprised about,
Yeah.
either way. We've got a question here, which is, do you know what? I'm going to completely hand over to you from Cindy.
Yeah, not a problem.
Um,
So yeah, how does the Western Church calculate Easter Sunday on the calendar? Shouldn't it line up with Passover? Where can I research this best? It's all confusing to me. Yeah, it's confusing to me too. So I wrote a section of this in Lost Prophecies of Qumran, and actually, Cindy, if you email me, joshpeckdisclosure@gmail.com, I'll send you that chapter. I'll actually just send you the whole book. It'll be a PDF, but if you email me with your email, I'll send you a PDF of the book. But I wrote a small section on that. And yeah, basically, like the Western Church, and we got it all messed up. Because there's like a whole bunch of different calendars at play here. There's obviously the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, but and this is at the time of Jesus. There was that, and the time the Jewish calendar. Like so there is, like when John says things like, they were celebrating the festival of the Jews. What he's saying is that it's like the state mandated festival of the Jews based on the lunar calendar, which is a different calendar than what John would have went along with, because he would have went along with the Essene, the Dead Sea Scroll calendar. So you have those two calendars, but then later on you have the Pharisees, who became the modern rabbinic Jews today. They've got their own calendar. And then even in America, we've had like 3 or 4 different iterations of calendars, like the Julian and Gregorian, and so all of that got screwed up, all of it got conflated and all mixed around, and now basically no church even knows what to do with with the Passover and Easter Sunday and all that stuff. You are able to lay it out with the Bible and the Dead Sea Scroll calendar to actually show the 3 days and 3 nights that he was in the grave, and you are able to map it all out, and you can apply it to the Dead Sea Scroll calendar to see what that would be modern day today. And actually, a great resource for that is DSS Calendar. Dead Sea Scroll, yeah, dsscalendar.org. And in that, you can put in any date, any year, and then you can look up what the original Dead Sea Scroll calendar would have those dates at. But if you want more of like a comprehensive thing where you can like read it and see a chart and actually understand how it all works, feel free to email me, joshpeckdisclosure@gmail.com, and I'd be happy to share with you a PDF of my book.
Okay, guys, I think one more, because I'm aware of Josh's time, and this is from Denise or D. Do you believe that the blackouts, etc., I think that's just basically everything that's coming on, are designed to cause chaos?
Oh yeah, for sure. Whether they're coming from, well, so for example, just recently, a bunch of phones went down, and there were rumors that it was maybe the Chinese, or maybe Russia, or maybe it was a hacking thing, or maybe it was an inside job. But regardless, they're definitely not meant for good. Even if no human being had anything to do with it, and it was just something that happened.
Yeah.
Well, I do believe the enemy can influence these things. And it happened, and it didn't cause anything good. It did cause a little bit of chaos. I mean, my phone was fine, and I didn't notice really any difference. I mean, there may be another part, but I could see how, like, in the future, if just every phone went down, especially if the grid went down and there was no electricity, oh man, yeah, that would absolutely cause chaos. But it seems like the question was, is it designed for that? It depends on how it would happen. If it was just a solar flare that occurred and knocked out all electricity, I would say that's a natural occurrence. And And maybe, if anything, it's like, hey, maybe we shouldn't be so dependent on technology because it can be turned off like that really easily. And God really is holding all of this together for us. So if something like that were to happen, I wouldn't think anybody did that, because I wouldn't even know how that would be possible. But if it's something like an EMP,
Yeah.
we hear stories about how North Korea has a satellite that comes over America every so often, and maybe it has the capabilities to launch an EMP that would just shut down our entire grid. Well, yeah, of course, the only reason they would do that is because they hate America and they want chaos to ensue, and they want us to destroy ourselves. So that would be a very effective way to take down an entire superpower nation like America. So yeah, I totally believe if it is designed, if it's in a circumstance where it's something that somebody did on purpose, absolutely that would be for chaos. There would be no other reason to do it.
We had an electricity sort of outage in our little, because we live in a little fishing village,
Mm-hmm.
and we had it in the middle of the day for like an hour, and I was getting texts from my children saying, "What's happening?" So I think there. Can I look? There's one more
Yeah,
question I can
yeah,
see
absolutely.
here. This is from a guy who goes to the church. We call him Lesser Gary because his
Okay.
name's Gary, but he's obviously not as cool as me. So it says, I heard a pastor say that when we die and go to heaven, God will wipe our memories and we won't know our loved ones, because if a close relative, i.e., a child or a parent, didn't make it to heaven, we would be very sad. Is this true?
No, I can, I
No.
can, this one I can actually answer pretty definitively,
Yeah.
because when we read in Revelation, the martyrs under the throne of God are begging God, when are you going to avenge this? When are you going to avenge us?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
they remember that they were martyred. They know,
Mhm.
they have some knowledge that that there are still martyrdoms happening. I don't know how much knowledge they have of what's going on Earth. I imagine they probably would have more than we know about what's going on in heaven. But no, so they definitely have a memory. Now, about the well, and even, I mean, there's all this, even in the Old Testament.
Yeah.
My son's going to go to his father's. He's talking about like Abraham's bosom, and it's
Yes.
the family units still
Yeah.
continue.
Yeah.
But now you bring up a good point, though. Well, what about our unsaved family members? I mean, they're burning in hell. Wouldn't we just be in total devastation over that? I think at that time, so I think there's two aspects of God that both are equally present. I mean, he's got a lot of aspects, but these two main ones, both are equally present. But one group of creation has a good knowledge on one, and one has good knowledge on the other. So grace and justice. We read that the angels are actually interested in us because of the grace. It's like the grace aspect is so, I don't know if confusing is the right word, but interesting, because they didn't get grace. Like the angels didn't get grace. The angels got judged immediately when they fell. Like
Yeah.
they have no hope of salvation. They have no hope of any
Yeah.
redemption at all. So with us, we understand the grace, but the justice that the angels know about because they experienced it firsthand, uh, the justice eludes us. So you could
Mhm.
almost say the opposite. It's like we kind of look at the angels, and we study that whole thing because we're interested in God's judgment and his justice. So the way I look at it is we see in part, we don't fully understand that aspect of God, probably for a good reason. Because if we did, we would have to be immediately judged too. The angels understand God's judgment. They fully knew, I believe, they
Yeah.
fully knew, it wasn't a surprise to them. They fully knew that if they sinned against God, if they did something, that's it. Like that would be immediately judged. I don't really get the psychology of why they still did it, but they
Mhm.
did. Maybe I think Satan thinks God's a liar. I don't know why he would think that, but that's the only way I can understand why he does the things he does, why he keeps fulfilling prophecy. Like why Satan knows scripture, so why is he still going to
Yeah.
do the Antichrist thing? I think Satan thinks he's so clever that I think Satan thinks the whole Bible is a lie to Satan, so that Satan will do something different. So Satan's just going to go along with it, thinking he's being tricky.
Yeah.
Because why else would he go along with it? But so angels don't really get grace, like they don't understand it in the way that we do. I don't think we understand justice, God's justice, in the way that the angels do. So when we get there, I think that we are going to understand it a lot better. We're going to have a more full, clear picture. And of course, I mean, but I think it's going to be, it's regretful that happened. It's regretful that this person didn't give their lives to Christ. But now I see God's justice and I understand it. God gave this person every opportunity, and God was right to honor this person's free will and honor this person's choice to not have anything to do with God. And I think we'll understand it so much better than that. We'll even say it would have been wrong if God brought this person into heaven when they died in their sins and they rejected Christ. I don't fully get that now, and I will fully admit I've got family members that aren't saved. I don't want to see anybody go to hell. I mean, I really don't. That is so horrifyingly like unsettling, and like that idea that that's even a possibility is just absolutely terrifying to me. But I believe in it because that's what the Bible says, and I trust. And I know the person that posted the question, Lesser Gary. I know Lesser Gary does too. We trust that God is perfect in his justice. And even if we can't understand it right now, we have to remember the angels don't really understand grace, but they believe in that too. And they're interested in it. We might not fully understand God's full justice, but we can definitely be interested in it and talk about these questions and ask these questions. So I think once we're there, we'll be comforted by the fact of, oh, okay, I see it now. Now it makes sense. Like, have you ever had a dream where it's a kind of a bad dream, but you feel like it's real? You really think it's real. And then you wake up and you're like, oh, thank God, this is the real world. Okay, this makes so much more sense because I thought that was real. Now looking back, it's silly that I thought that was real, but I thought it was, and that was horrible. But now, I'm awake, and it just makes so much more sense, and I get it. This is my life. Okay. I think it's going to be something like that. I actually think sometimes God lets us have that experience to kind of give us an example of what it's like. We'll get there, and we'll wake up in a sense where we'll just know, we'll understand, we'll be made perfect, which perfect doesn't just mean you don't do anything wrong. It means you're fully mature. You're fully what God created you to be. You're in full like maturation. So we'll see fully then in a way that we can't now. So for now, all we have to do is trust. But I love that these questions are being asked, and I would never say, "Oh, you just got to trust in God, so just forget about it. Why are you even asking?" I would never say that. That's a great question, and that's one of my favorite questions. So thank you, Lester Gary, for asking that. Hopefully,
I've used that, mate.
Hopefully, I gave an adequate enough answer.
I think he just said he's deleting me. There's I don't know, like I could talk to you all day, Josh. There is another question that's just popped up.
Yeah, let's do it.
I don't know if you're interested. It's
absolutely,
it is quite interesting here.
Let's do it.
When Ezekiel was getting his vision, so it's an Ezekiel one, I think it's referring to, seeing the temple being measured. Is it possible when he saw, or who he saw was John, since it is outside of time?
I actually just looked into this again because yes, I believe so, and I don't think it was Ezekiel 1. It might have been 10 or later on. And I know. Same here. Like I was during that time when I was looking it up, I was on a time crunch, and I didn't have enough time to go and find it, so I didn't find the passage. But obviously, the one in Revelation is really easy to find. But Gary Stearman wrote a book called Time Travelers of the Bible, and I believe he talked about that. So and when I first heard the argument, I wouldn't be able to recite it now because this was years ago, but when I first heard the argument, I was like, oh my gosh, that makes so much sense. Like Ezekiel and John, like there's like a time thing going on there. But I wouldn't be able to fully articulate it now because it's been so many years and I don't remember the passages and the exact argument. So I would refer the person to Time Travelers of the Bible by Gary Stearman. And I'm like 99% sure that he dealt with that. But there are other circumstances of possible like a type of time travel in the Bible. I think the Transfiguration.
Yes.
I don't think that's Moses and Elijah in their glorified bodies. I think that was Elijah right before he went to what was it, Horeb maybe?
Yeah.
Well, first with Moses, that one I think is pretty easy. I think that's when he was on the mountain, and then when he came down, his face was shiny, and they had to cover his face.
Yeah.
I think that was because that was the transfiguration. That was the time that Jesus called Moses there. Well, Elijah in that other account, and this was right after Elijah wanted to die, and God like gave him some food that were brought by the birds and stuff, and he's got to make this journey. Well, there's a curious line in there where it says that after Elijah heard the small still voice, he's not in the fire, he's not in the after he heard the still small voice, he covered his face.
Yeah.
Why would that be? It doesn't say his face was shining, but that's the only clue that I have. And so why else would that be? It seems like it might have been like an homage thing to Moses, because if that was the time, and when you look at those two accounts, they're so similar, like what Moses went through and what Elijah did. I actually just did a video on this. I think it's called, it's on my Daily Renegade YouTube channel, but it's something like, was Elijah's rapture time travel or something like that. It's called something like that. But I recently did a video and went all into that. And by the way, that is available at dailyrenegade.com. And I think I put my show notes in there. But yeah, so I think there are definitely times throughout the Bible where we see these weird time anomalies. But what's great about it is it's always God doing it. It's always Jesus doing it. And it just shows just how amazingly powerful of a God that we serve, that he's even like the master of time, where we can't even really understand time. We just know it exists. So yeah, great question.
Listen, I am so thankful. You have went for almost 2 hours, and I know that if I just leave it, people will keep asking questions. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to suggest as well, if you're okay with, I know that you're starting in a few weeks, Prophecy Watchers, and we actually have Derek Gilbert coming up, we have Mondo Gonzalez coming up, but what I would really like to do, I don't know, I'll just run it past you now and put you on the spot, is maybe do a super sort of session where we have a few of you guys and have everybody bounce off each other. Would you be interested in that?
Yeah, I would love that. I might have to wait till after I move, since the moving date's a little ambiguous and I don't know when I'm going to move. But yes, 100%. I would love to do that. That would be a lot of fun.
And if you, I will also send you a couple of videos from my recon trip recently. I want to sort of, there's certainly one video we were in a megalithic tomb, 5,000 something years old, and I caught some things that you think interdimensionally on camera.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so I just want to get your take on it, because
I would love to see that.
Yeah. So guys, if you could do me a favor, if you could thank Josh for coming on tonight, and if you're on our YouTube channel, you will see in the description the link to his channel, and follow him at Daily Renegade. Pray for him as his family's moving to Oklahoma. And guys, again, a big thank you to Josh for coming on tonight.
Anytime.
I'm going to end the broadcast here, Josh, and I'll say goodbye to you when we're off air.
All right, sounds good, brother.
Okay, guys, God bless.
Love you all. God bless.